Hi, Dougie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Sidra. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you are an award-winning painter who specializes in figurative realism and portraiture. Tell me how one gets started with all of that.
Oh, wow. We're going way back. I actually started drawing people, mostly my family members, even when I was a kid. I was always interested in drawing. I had early art lessons, like a lot of artists, but it was always faces that drew me. So, when you're sitting around watching TV with your family in the evenings, I would sketch my family members.
And so you use pastels quite a bit,
Yes.
right? What drew you to that?
I started in pastel mostly out of necessity because I was a working mom at the time. And it allowed me to quickly pick up a stick, do something with it. 15 minutes, you can do a lot in 15 minutes with pastel. I feel like my work looks like paintings. Often they're actually mistaken for like oil or acrylic paintings. Sometimes people can't believe that they are pastel paintings because the detail I'm able to get with them. So just the versatility of it, the immediacy of it. I like that there's nothing between me and the painting. So, when you blend a little bit, your fingers get dirty and you're right there, you're touching the surface. And I love that. I love not having anything between me and the painting. So for all of those reasons, and of course, the amazing colors, the opacity of it, they're just very clear, beautiful, beautiful colors. Right? If you don't overblend them and make them muddy. So lots of pros for using pastel. The main drawback for me is that they pretty much always have to be framed under glass.
Oh, okay.
But that's about it. That's about the only drawback that I can think of.
So from one mom to another, it's like I want to do what I want to do, but I have to figure out how to incorporate what I want to do. Still consider, the people that are dependent upon me. So,
Right.
So this painting behind you.
I have two daughters, and those are actually two paintings of one of my daughters, my youngest one. The top piece is actually called Angel in Waiting. Because to me, that's what our kids are to us. Not saying that they're perfect by any means, but we see the beauty, we see the specialness, but they don't often see that at that age, and especially girls. I mean, that's a really hard time in the life of a woman. And so I wanted to deal with that, of her looking at herself in the mirror and contemplating what she sees and the judgment that comes with that. So yeah, we did a photo shoot in our bathroom where I steamed up, had the shower running, and the mirror was all steaming up, and I was sort of behind her taking the pictures in the mirror. What I had forgotten about is that my camera the lens of the camera would also steam up.
So do all of your portraits, do you take a photograph and then create from the photograph?
Most of the time, I've done a lot of life drawing and like studio settings, and that's great for practice. And I always tell my students, by all means, you have to have that foundation. But I like to capture spontaneous moments and a lot of emotion. And I can't get that when I have a live model holding the same pose for hours at a time. And even my daughter, when I have had her pose live for me, she will yawn every 2 seconds. She will get so bored, she'll get droopy, and and it's not fun for her. It's not fun for me. I always worry about the model, whether they're too hot, too cold, are they bored? Do I have to keep talking to entertain them? So it's easier for me to get the effect that I want, like the emotion that I want, by having a photo shoot and taking a lot of pictures, and then working in the studio by myself, where I don't have to worry about anybody's comfort except mine. And I can get into my headspace a lot easier that way. I can get into that zone that I need to get into because there's nobody else there with me. So most of the time nowadays, yes, I work from photos. I always try to take my own photos if I can. I do a lot of commission work. Sometimes I've done posthumous portraits, and then I have to work from, photos that the families give me.
Right.
Always harder, much, much harder. I like to, if I have the chance, I like to meet the person, do a photo shoot. I get to see them from all angles. I get to see their natural coloring. I get to see their facial expressions, and I can move around them, and I can let them move around. And then I take a lot of time going through all of those photos to figure out which one is the best one. Now that's for commission portraits. And when I work with a model for my own work, it's kind of the same thing. Sometimes I have an idea of what I want, whether it's a new series, like I did a series of underwater paintings, and or it's a more social, political issues that I want to address. So I will come at it with a certain model and tell her my ideas, but then very often she will bring whatever she brings to it as well. One of the models that I've worked with a lot is a dancer. And that is fantastic because she is so comfortable in her own skin and her body and the way she moves. So that was always a really great collaboration for me. And then sometimes during that photo shoot, some things will happen. She will do something or move a certain way or look a certain way. And then it's like, oh, now I'm going in a slightly different direction, or I will create different paintings or different series out of one photo shoot.
So do you have any formal training in photography?
No, none. And I'm not a good photographer. I have tried over the years to learn all the technical aspects of it. But for some reason, it just, I don't know, it just doesn't click with me very well. I tend to forget it. So I just set my camera on automatic and just shoot away. I figure I can change whatever I need to. Not even in my computer so much. I'll do that a little bit, but I don't even do Photoshop. I like to do more fun paintings of kids. I did a series of kids blowing bubbles, for instance. Things that kids actually do.
You kind of share with us like what your creative process is, because what I found is it's not linear. It's like there's some procrastination built in.
That was the first thing that I thought of. I'm a huge procrastinator, and I have beat myself up over it over the years, but I'm starting to make friends with that, where it is, and to just accept that is part of my process. It's like a really slow start until I run. I have to warm up, and we're talking sometimes hours. I mean, there are so many things as a working artist that have nothing to do with painting that you still have to do, and now add to that social media posts and everything else.
Right.
So I tend to do all of that first. First of all, I want to know that those tasks are done. So that then I can just, okay, now the rest of the day is painting. But it also, I don't know, it's my running start, and then a few hours go by and I'm already in my head beating myself up. Oh, I'm getting a late start. But then once I start, I'm really in it. And I tend to be more of a night owl anyway, or at least an evening person. So my most creative time is definitely not first thing in the morning. So I'm not one of those artists who can go into the studio at 9 a.m. and start painting. It just would not be pretty because I'm just not, my body just said, my mind doesn't work that way. In the afternoon is when I get really, then it flows.
Right.
When I'm then painting, I listen a lot to NPR or podcasts or music. When I'm stuck on something, when things are not going well, I will turn on music and it has to be music that I'm very familiar with.
Mm.
I will then just start like singing along with the music, and I'm not a good singer. You don't ever want to be in the studio with me when I'm singing. Humming or singing, that vibration in the body,
Mhm.
I think it helps the creative process.
So interesting because so much of the process is about, or I'll say a large part of it is about like accepting yourself and like where you are in that
Yes.
moment. So
Yes.
it's a simple idea, but so hard.
Yes, but I'm glad you said that, because it really does come down to that. And I think that the older I get, because I'm going to be 60 later this year, I'm learning, like, everything that I fought, like I'm thinking, no, I have to go in at 9 and I have to start painting and I have to, be done at a certain time. And it hasn't worked for me all these decades. So why am I still trying to fit into that mold? I think there is a certain discipline that comes along with it. So I'm not saying you have to wait for inspiration to hit you before you start, so even if you just pick up a pencil and a sketch pad and you're not in the mood, but you just start doodling or you just start putting pen to paper.
Mhm.
I know that as well as a writer, that all of a sudden, okay, now the wheels are turning and they're gonna get faster and faster, and then things start flowing.
So I agree with you. I think a lot of it is showing up. And I think that as we mature, get older, however you want to say it, you stop thinking about what the other person is doing, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
like, this is
Right.
who I am and this is how I do it. And the way that I do it is okay.
Exactly. And I, if any young people ever watch this, that I wish they would, yeah. And that's what I hope that they get from this, is that whatever works for you, make that work. And it's fine. It doesn't mean that, it's a wrong way to do it. One other thing that I hear from a lot of young people or just artists starting out is that was very helpful for me to learn, that even if you're a professional artist with, decades of painting, not everything we do turns out. I have a whole pile of things that either end up in the trash or they end up in a drawer that nobody ever sees. But because we tend to be out in the world seeing paintings that are framed and in a gallery or wherever you see them,
Mhm.
we think, okay, they're so far advanced that whenever they sit down to paint something, it turns into a frameable piece, and it
Right.
doesn't.
Right. I interviewed another painter and he told me the same thing.
And that's normal. And I actually remember, I think it was Maya Angelou that I read this about, and this was the turning point for me. Very accomplished in many different genres.
Right.
And she said every time she sits down to write a new book, she thinks that, oh, now they're going to find out
Yes.
that I can't really write,
Right.
that those were a fluke. Everything before, I mean, oh my God, if Maya Angelou can say that.
Right.
Okay, so on the one hand, it was a little depressing where I thought, you mean this is never going to go away, this feeling? On the other hand, there was freedom in that. Like, okay, this is never going to go away. You're always going to be maybe nervous or anxious or whatever you feel before you start something new and then have to put it out in the world. There's always that nervousness and fear. But the fact that even very accomplished artists can still feel that way,
Mhm.
kind of like took that off the table for me. It's like, okay, that's just part of being an artist.
It's what it is. Right.
Right. Before, when I was not a full-time painter, my time in the studio was very precious. I had a full-time job, I had kids. So there was always, sometimes, a few weeks would go by before I had time to go into the studio. So there was always this pressure of, oh, it has to turn out.
Right.
Because otherwise I wasted the time that, I could have, played with my kids or, could have done something else. And I may not come back in here again for a couple of weeks because my day job is taking over. So there was this immense pressure that whatever I produced that day had to be showable.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't allow myself a lot of time for experimentation because of that.
Right.
Once I became a full-time painter, that fell away too, because there's still that feeling of, if I spend a few days experimenting and nothing really worked out, I have to remind myself that it still was time well worth spent.
Mm-hmm.
I learned something. If you have the time, and again, that comes back to showing up, if you can every day, even if it's 5 minutes sketching something every day, but if you show up, the more you show up, the more you learn and grow, and the more you can allow yourself to also experiment and try something new, rather than always going back to painting what you already know how to paint.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know
I love talking about this because it's such a personal endeavor, right? It's just like you and you.
well, and that comes back to not thinking about how this may be perceived by others. First it has to please you.
Right.
If you constantly have in your head of what other people are going to think about it, whether it's a gallerist or a collector or a critic, it can paralyze you.
Mm-hmm.
That fear, that pressure. So first, just do something that really brings you joy, that interests you, if you want to try something different. And then ask yourself, do you like it? I just have to trust that if there's something about it that resonates with me, it will resonate with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always surprising, because there have been people that have bought paintings that I would have not thought that this particular person would buy that particular piece. So you never know. You really never know what somebody else will see in the work and who might end up owning it.
So you were born in Berlin, Germany, right? How much time did you spend there? Like, when did you come to the States?
I was, born and raised in West Berlin. I came to the United States very young by myself. I married an American. My family stayed in Germany, so I'm the only one here.
So do you find that your culture, the culture that you brought with you from Germany, even as a young person, because actually those are the most formative years, does that show up in your work? Or do you feel like, how does that kind of present itself?
Yeah, I think it does, but maybe not so much what I brought with me. It's more, I was a flight attendant for many years, so I flew the Germany trip. So I was constantly immersed in both cultures, even after I moved to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And Berlin is a really dynamic city, and it's full of artists. It's a little bit like New York in that sense. They call it poor but sexy. So it has the gritty areas. It has some really beautiful areas. It's known for their graffiti and their murals, so that it has that edginess to it. Still prevalent, I believe, in Germany overall is abstract art, conceptual art, abstract art, not so much realism. You still don't see very much of that there. It's having a comeback in America too, has been for a few years now, thank goodness. But in Germany, that's still less, but it is starting to come back too. So I still like that aesthetic. I live near LA now, and I love all the murals and the graffiti in LA too. It's always been something that has interested me. So I actually have done paintings with graffiti in the background, and I'll probably have more coming up, because I still love that. So, and going back and forth, seeing the art over there versus the art here, it just kind of fills my creative well. I keep a folder on my desktop with images that I see that really interest me, usually completely different from my own work, but there's just something about it that I like. And again, it could be a style, it could be a color, it could be a perspective, I mean, anything. And I just keep it in that folder. And every now and then I will just go kind of through that folder just to, kind of stir up the juices a little bit and get the mind going. And even when I was not flying to Germany, I flew a lot to Paris, to London, South America, and other destinations. I always went to museums and galleries. So I was exposed to a lot of international art. And it's interesting how different it is in different countries.
What are the practical things or the things that you do kind of in your everyday life that you would consider by doing them, you're filling your creative well?
Looking at other people's art, although there are times sometimes when I have to stop that for a while, because you can oversaturate that too. You know, it can kind of dilute your own ideas.
Yes.
Because there's so much art, especially now with like Instagram and before Instagram, it was Pinterest. It can confuse me a little too much where, okay, I'm so overwhelmed by all these different things that I'm seeing. And, oh, I want to try that. And, oh, maybe I want to try that. And let me try that. And I have to rein myself back in and say, okay, stay focused, stay on the path right now. So I find that very helpful looking at other people's work. Now, having said that, I also feel like we have to be careful not to compare ourselves too much with other people. I think it's important that we, as far as growth goes, you just, compare yourself to what you've done before. And are you getting better? And are you getting closer to what you want to achieve? So I think that's important. But yes, going to, and even for me, movies, I love film. Watching movies, watching good TV shows. To me, that's just another art form. And I will get inspiration from that, whether it's the way they lit it or the way the scene is done, the composition. I mean, a really good film, every frame is like a painting to me, if it's done well. You can see the composition in it, and reading, writing, hugely important, constantly filling that well too. So all of the music is another one. I get a lot of inspiration from lyrics, song titles. I use them a lot in titling my own work. So all of those genres are very important for me personally, to just keep looking, listening, reading, and then trying to, I think what I was saying earlier with the abstraction and realism and seeing both so much, my goal ultimately is to combine that more and more. And I've done some work that way, and that's really where I'm going. I like the idea of combining the two. Where I am, I'm at Studio Channel Islands in Camarillo, and there's about 40 other artists there. And anything from weavers to painters to potters, I like being around that, and I like seeing their work, because even though I'm not a weaver, but there might be something in the texture or the pattern or the colors that I see that inspire me. And I think it's just important to be open to all different kinds of art. You don't know how it's going to feed your own art.
Right.
But it does. I think it's all sort of connected, and it does.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You've shared so much like practical information. That, like you said, I hope younger, or I won't even say younger, I would rather say like artists who are just starting off, because it really doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, and that's really what I meant. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, you've shared so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Sidra.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.